shield us from spying and to allow for an effective dialogue about fairness and political change to grow without fear of reprisals. Now, this is profoundly worrying. An Internet of Things surveillance state will put the spies under your skin and literally inside your bed, in your toilet, and in your wallet. But the conclusion is not foreordained. Cryptography works, right? This is Turing's other legacy, that we can make messages that we can scramble so thoroughly that no one else can ever unscramble them. It is as though at some deep and foundational level, the universe wants us to have secrets. In a corrupted world, the only sustainable policies must generate an economic surplus for their beneficiaries, who will use them to lobby for the policy's ongoing maintenance, right? The only stuff that Whitehall can do reliably is stuff that makes someone rich, so that person can pay lobbyists to keep that policy from being knocked over by a different one that will make someone else rich. One of the reasons that Western governments spy is that spying is conducted through public-private partnerships, allowing companies like Booz Allen, which was Edward Snowden's former employer, to reap extraordinary windfall profits, a large portion of which are invested in lobbying for more surveillance. Every walled garden exists to extract monopoly rents for its proprietors, to make printer ink more expensive than champagne, to make 3D printer nylon powder more expensive than filet mignon. As Amazon founder Jeff Bezos famously told the booksellers, "Your margin is my opportunity." The $10 billion that Apple takes in from the App Store is $10 billion that can be taken by its rivals if they're allowed to operate their own versions of the App Store. And then they can use their riches to lobby for policy that makes it legal to jailbreak the devices around us and make it possible for users to decide what runs on them and make it impossible for lawful interception bugs to be put in our devices and make it harder for the state to control the spread of information about vulnerabilities that make us vulnerable to surveillance. That's critical, because when it's already illegal to install unapproved and transparent code on your devices, the state can introduce new modes of surveillance at knockdown prices. All they need to do is rock up to Apple's office or Google's office or Nintendo's office or Microsoft's office, anyone who's got an appliance in your house or on your person, chock full of cameras and other sensors, and say, you know that app store that you have? From now on, you must ensure that any apps that you sell have a backdoor that we can use to spy. And because it's a felony to jailbreak those devices and install third-party code that might not have that capacity in the name of fighting piracy, the job is done. Walled gardens are panopticons. Corporations in the states they colonize each have a perverse incentive to make it impossible for users to prevent themselves from being spied upon. They make you a tenant of your computers, not its owner. We've seen examples of this. Amazon once inadvertently sold copies of George Orwell's 1984 to people that it wasn't licensed to sell. The patchwork of global copyright laws means that Orwell is in the public domain in some places and not others. Having realized their mistake, they decided that they would reach into people's Kindles and take those books back. You can't make this stuff up. In a walled garden world, property is only owned by the powerful. You might have thought that you bought that Orwell book in the sense that you bought all the books that are on your shelves today, but in fact you were a tenant of that book, and its owner is a distant company whose wealth exists on no place on land, and is instead swirling somewhere in the Irish Sea where the taxman can't reach it. So this brings me nearly to the end of the talk, which is good because we're running out of time. Why I think there's hope for this, and what I'm doing about it, and what you can do about it. You may have read that I've gone back to work for my former employer, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I'm taking a part-time leave of absence from Boing Boing for the next 2 years to help run a project called Apollo 1201. 1201 is the section of the American copyright law that bans breaking DRM. And we've made our own Apollo mission to end DRM in our lifetimes. Within 10 years, we want to end it everywhere in the world. We're beginning with a legal challenge to 1201 that will be launching shortly. That will challenge the constitutionality of prohibiting people from publishing source code that allows them to do stuff that companies don't want them to do. While that lawsuit is in play, and will take something like 10 years probably to get to the Supreme Court, the legality of jailbreaking devices will go from certainly illegal to maybe legal, depending on how our lawsuit comes together. And we will be encouraging industrial entities to start businesses that are based on that idea that your margin is my opportunity, to start eking away at all those walled gardens to denormalize the idea that it's legitimate to make a profit by locking people out of devices that they own and by making it impossible for them to know if those devices are honoring their requests or acting to betray them. As that industry spreads through the United States, it creates scope for all of America's trading partners who have been inveigled and arm twisted by the US Trade Representative into adopting their own versions of 1201 to have their activist groups and their industrial groups go to their governments and say, the US Trade Representative engaged us in a suicide pact. They said that they wouldn't do this industrial activity if we didn't either, but they're doing it. Why are we upholding it? And as we start to chip away at the global system of laws for this, we will move towards a court date in which judges will not be asking themselves what might happen if circumvention is allowed, but what is happening in the world where circumvention has become a fact of life. It'll be much like the fight over the VCR's legality, where in 1976, when the VCR was created, it was anyone's guess what it would do to the film industry. And if one expert predicted that it would be great for movies, another expert could predict just as credibly that it would be terrible for them. But by 1984, when the Supreme Court ruled on it, there were 6 million VCRs in America. The judges drove past video rental stores to get to the courtroom that morning, and anyone who said that the VCR was the Boston Strangler of the American film industry sounded like an idiot. So start thinking about how start thinking about how you might make or use services that you can build or use when anti-circumvention is a thing of the past. Whether that's a Steam store, a third-party store for the PS4 or the Xbox that lets you buy games from anyone, not just the people who signed up for their developer programs. Alternative app stores for your mobile devices. A device for a mechanic that allows her to read the informatics off of any car without having to engage in a license arrangement with the car's manufacturer. PVRs that hook up to your cable box or your Sky box, or that allow you to time shift movies that come over your Apple TV or your Chrome key. DVD ripping appliance that sits on your bookshelf and has a red light and a green light, and you stick your DVDs into it, and they spit them back out again, and once all of your DVDs have been fed into it, they're all sitting on a hard drive ready for you to load on your phone or your tablet without having to buy them again. As the law changes, we can denormalize the commercial, moral, and technical reality of computers whose default response to you is not yes, master, but
I can't let you do that, Dave.
You may think, based on all I've just said, that the real fight, as far as I'm concerned, is over this cryptography business, over who gets to control their computers, or what ciphers are allowed, or which ones aren't, or information security. But that's not true. The world reels under real problems. The climate crisis, the sectarian conflict around the world, economic disparity, corruption and poverty, discrimination. But all of those fights, as important as they are, as more important as they are than fights over computer policy, all of those fights will be won or lost on the internet. People ask me if I'm optimistic or pessimistic about the future of the internet, but the reality is it doesn't really matter if you're optimistic or pessimistic about the future of the internet, because the one thing that we're pretty sure of is that the internet has a future. And if you were optimistic that the internet would be a force for human liberation, you would get up, I hope, every morning and do everything you could to make the internet more apt to produce that wonderful outcome. And if you were pessimistic about the future of the internet, and you thought that it was likely to be a force for oppression and control, you would get up every morning and do everything you could to make the internet a place that was a force for human liberation. So rather than being optimistic or pessimistic, I think a better way to frame this is hope. Hope is a wonderful thing. It's not enough, but it's indispensable. If your ship sinks in the middle of the ocean, you tread water until you run out of energy, not because you have a good chance of being picked up, but because everyone who was ever picked up in the middle of the sea treaded water until rescue arrived. That's hope, right? It's not enough, but it's important. And if the neighbors or the people you loved who were on that ship went down with you and they couldn't tread water for themselves, you would wrap their arms around your neck and kick twice as hard, because that's hope too. So we tend to view these devices and these decisions we make, these network decisions that we make, through a kind of utilitarian lens. Sometimes we get cynical about it and say that there's nothing that we can do. But I think we can do something. And I think that we can bring an intentionality to the decisions that we make about what we buy, what we use, what we accept, what we normalize, what we say to our friends about privacy, about security, about about authoritarianism and about devices that respect you versus devices that take control away. I'll leave you, as we run out of time here, with one last remark on the theme of hope, which is that I helped found an organization here in the UK called the Open Rights Group that actually has held events here at Imperial College. I derive no financial benefits from it, nor have I ever, and I am an advisor to it. I'm not even on its board, but I'm immensely proud of what it's done. And it is engaged with these struggles in the UK and plans on making it an election issue. We are in an election year, the first election year after Snowden. And this is the year in which this issue has the biggest chance of becoming an election issue, and org is working to make it part of the election. And I hope that you'll look up the Open Rights Group's website, consider joining its mailing list, and being available for its action items when it asks you to speak to your MP or to your Lord as things like the Snoopers Charter come back, and perhaps even become a member. The subscription is £5 a month, and help us continue to expand the work product that we do every year to try and make the world a better place. Thank you all very much.